Thank you for coming out tonight. I'm Nicole. I'm the manager of Oblong Books here in beautiful Rhinebeck, New York. A few reminders before we start our event tonight. 1, you're in a bookstore. Do you like events? Do you like books? Buy books. They make great gifts. 2, if you like events, we do a lot of them. Sign up for our newsletter. Keep an eye out for fun stuff. We'll be here doing fun stuff. 3, stay hydrated today. It's really hot out. Now I get to roll into the fun part. Tonight we have 2 wonderful authors. Our In Conversation speaker tonight is Emet North, author of In Universes, which is an incredible speculative novel. I have not read it yet. I'm so excited to read it because John has impeccable taste and John loves it. Therefore, I know I will love it. Emet is in conversation tonight with the remarkable John Wiswell for his new book, Wearing the Lion, which is a reimagining of the Hercules myth. I have loved John's writing since I read Someone You Can Build a Nest In, before it even came out last year, which is now not, it has won the Nebula, has won the Locus, and is nominated for the Hugo Award, which means if it wins the Hugo, I will be exclusively referring to John as a Triple Crown winner. I'm so excited to listen to these 2 talk about writing, about John's new book, about speculative fiction generally, and I know you're all going to have a tremendous time listening to them. So please give a huge round of applause for John and Emet.
Thank you all so much for coming in tonight.
Braving the heat.
It is just a real pleasure to be able to do this with you tonight.
Likewise, thank you so much for having me. Congratulations on the new book. I'm so excited for everyone to love it as much as they love Someone You Can Build a Nest In, which is rightfully getting all the laurels. Okay, most basic question to start off. Where did you get the idea? I'm sure you've been asked that a dozen times, but I still want to know.
Yeah, I got the idea when I was like 6 years old, when my parents would read Greek mythology to me. And the interesting thing about mythology is no matter who tells it, no matter how thoroughly they try to tell it, it's always full of gaps. It's things the culture took for granted, it's the things the culture didn't think of, it's the things the particular storyteller's angle elided, which is why folklore and mythology, and now superheroes, are these things that can be constantly reiterated upon because a new creator can always bring something out of them. And with Hercules, or Heracles as the Greeks called him, and since he was Greek, I call him that, his story has so many things that generally go unexamined. For instance, the 12 epic labors. So Heracles is the biggest, baddest son of Zeus, and he is driven mad by the Furies because Hera hates him. Hera, Zeus's wife, goddess of family, goes like, Zeus has cheated on me one too many times. That guy in particular is going to suffer for it. And sends the Furies and drives him mad and makes him destroy his own family. And to pay penance for it, Heracles goes and does the 12 amazing labors, and then is a cool guy who retires. And that's weird to me because if a parent did that, they'd think about it again. It would come up, but it doesn't come up in nearly any of the classic fiction. Euripides has a play where it happens to his wife and children for no reason, and he just comes home after having done the 12 labors and goes like, what happened? Which is very strange, but at least he's sad about it for a minute. And so I wanted to explore a few gaps. One of those gaps is, what is the psychology of a man who wakes up from an episode like that? And what would it do to you for the rest of your life? And one of the things, the first thing that comes to mind is he would never want to hurt anyone again. That he would be so traumatized by the view of his own hands that he would be incentivized to look at nonviolence. Yeah. And the idea that his actual problems, his trauma, his loss of his family, are things that no amount of strength actually solves. You can't be too tough to be traumatized. Yeah. We know it. But also, being able to lift the earth and the sky doesn't remedy what's been done with your own hands. So what does that do to him? And the natural result of that for me, because I'm a bit unusual, is he is sent on these labors, kill this giant lion, kill this hydra, catch this boar. It's like, I don't want to hurt them. And so he goes into conflict with them, and he's like, well, has anyone tried petting the lion?
What if I just cuddle the lion really tight?
Yeah, like, because I'm strong
like,
enough.
oh, that's so nice.
Yeah, I mean, I'm strong enough that I can just grab the lion and he can't move. But, like, I don't want to hurt him either. So I'm just sort of hugging this lion. I'm like, I'm sorry, buddy. And what has happened? If he tries that, what happens if a divine lion gets affection for the first time in its existence? Why is the Hydra so ill-tempered? I'll tell you. Heracles gets to the bottom of it. Migraines are the Hydra's big problem. And if you would just cut off enough of my heads, the migraines will go away. And I'll help you. I'll do whatever you want, buddy. And so suddenly he's got a brainy friend who's a snake. And building a found family out of the things you were sent to slay because you feel monstrous and they understand you was this huge potential in the story that I really wanted to explore, which if you've read Someone You Can Build a Nest In, you'd understand. Of course, I wrote another book in which we commune with monsters because there's something in common in our experiences. The other huge gap that I really wanted to explore is how Hera gets shortchanged in the story. Because in the story, Hera hates Heracles very much, sends the Furies to drive him mad, and then checks out. And I was like, no, surely she did something on Wednesday. Like something happened. And so I wanted to explore, like, let's not just reduce Hera to a flat two-dimensional, I hate the children of my husband who cheats on me. What is her life actually like? And will she ever get a reckoning? Will she ever realize, like, I can outgrow what I am? I fill up the cosmos, and I could be more than people say I am. The idea that she could struggle with guilt. Goddess of family who is responsible for a family die. Does that do something to her psychologically? Probably. Is that why she checks out of Heracles' story? Probably. But actually to address that and treat her like a three-dimensional character, because Hera is a fascinating character, but in much of even the Greek plays, which I love, I have a soft spot for Aristophanes and Sophocles, but in the classic plays, she usually doesn't get much beyond, like, being the Greek devil. She's just the bad one. Well, what is her life actually like, and who does she view as her family? Who are the people around her? And giving her an entourage of, like, the Furies for her are her grandmothers, and they just, like, they're the wise ones who are like, we want better for you, honey.
Please stop.
Yeah, but, like,
Did you always have both Hera and Heracles' perspectives?
Almost immediately, yeah, because she's so shortchanged, and she usually gets shortchanged even in myth retellings. Yeah. And then when I got the counterpoint of Heracles, so Heracles is actually born by the name of Alcides, and then to try to pacify Hera, to make her not hate him, his parents rename him Heracles, which in Greek means Herakleos, Hera's glory. They're like, see, we named him after how cool you are, so you won't put snakes in his crib. Immediately snakes are in his crib. She really wants to get rid of him. And the counterpoint between this guy who just loves Hera and reveres her more than anyone because he's been raised to think she's great. And he's like, you don't understand her, all right? I understand Auntie Hera. And he always calls her Auntie Hera. In fact, most of his chapters are, Dear Auntie Hera, and then he prays to her. Whereas hers are often like, stop praying to me! I cannot stand you. And the counterpoints of him revering her and her getting more annoyed by how much he likes her.
Which you could imagine if somebody had, like, sort of spat in your face, and then that person was like, no, you're my favorite, I love you. Like, I could imagine. Like, it's like, I think one of your strengths is that you make characters very empathetic, right? Like, it's easy to have, like, empathy for Hera. I mean, not quite so far as she goes, but up to a point, right? Where, like, she's being disrespected, and then now she's being, like, treated. It wouldn't be great. It wouldn't be ideal.
Yeah, and then that final gap is what you're talking about. Is we have empathy with her at least up until she does the unthinkable, and then there is no right thing for anyone to do. If a family has been annihilated, it's not like, oh, just put a Band-Aid on it. They're all going to be fine. What do you do then? Even if you can move the heavens and the earth, revenge is not enough. Revenge doesn't really even help in this circumstance. And she realizes, like, I have all of this power over the cosmos, and I can't make him whole. Yeah. And in fact, if he finds out it's me, he's going to lose it because I'm his favorite. Yeah. While he is moving heaven and earth to find out who did it, because he wants to get justice for himself, his family, and Auntie Hera. It's a bit of a problem in wrestling with, well, if we know revenge is not enough, and we know restorative justice is not possible, what's the right thing to do? And that's the struggle that sends them both across the earth, trying to find the right thing to do for anyone. So those were the inspirations of these gaps that are they beg humanity to look into them. What belongs in these spaces that the poets and the novelists haven't explored yet?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting to think about. You were saying like strength, like all-powerful strength doesn't stop you from getting traumatized, doesn't stop. And in fact, actually, I think what the book sort of suggests is that the strength can make you more, like if you're very, 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 very strong, it's easy to hurt people, right? Like, the more power that you have, if you're Hera, like, you can make a quick, snap decision that has devastating consequences, right? Like, if you're Heracles and you have this, like, inhuman strength, it's easy to hurt someone in ways that you don't even intend, necessarily. So it's not only it doesn't protect you from hurting people or from being hurt, it actually can make it easier to do harm if you're not being cognizant of your role.
Yeah.
So monstrosity.
Oh yes, monstrosity.
So monstrosity.
The theme.
I would say very central to both of the books. And I'm curious, like, yeah, I don't know, general thought, like, what calls to you in that theme? And I guess a sort of corollary to that is, like, I'd say your books are very invested in monstrosity and in like this sort of radical act of forgiveness, of being like, this character has done something terrible, now what? And like positing that there are ways to move forward from that. And so I'm curious about how you think both about monstrosity and also about like accountability and the balance between those things in your fiction, because I do feel like it's so, like, they're both so necessary, but I feel like it can be very difficult to be like, how do you hold them both side by side?
That's a great way to look at it. Accountability versus monstrosity. So monstrosity might be like a theme.
Which sometimes monstrosity is just like very unfair, right? Like
yes.
Sometimes monstrosity is just like, we don't like this sort of person. But sometimes monstrosity is like, whoops, I've accidentally like caused my obsessed nephew to kill his family because I was feeling jealous of my husband. Like, sometimes it's a little bit more earned.
Yeah, well, because monstrosity as a political class or as a caste in a society is rooted in something, whether the prejudice is warranted or unwarranted, right? So my notion is if we look at society as a striation of class privileges, at the bottommost would be monstrosity. Who do you dehumanize? Who do you demonize? Who do you scapegoat? Yeah. Monstrosity is projected at the danger that a gay person might be in your neighborhood. Yeah. Did you know your children might see a gay person, might be read a story by a drag queen at a library where you're present?
Oh, God.
And it's a moral panic because monstrosity has been projected onto a person. Now, monstrosity is frequently projected onto non-human animals, which I got to play with some in this book. But a lot of our monstrosity around non-human animals is similarly unearned. You know, we're terrified of shark attacks, and hey, I'm scared of Jaws. That movie's good at making me scared. But even the sharks rarely attack people, and when they do, they're overwhelmingly likely to bite once and then go away. Why? Because we don't have enough fat in our bloodstream to be tasty. They bite it and it's like, oh God, it's a bag of garbage. I'm out of here. And then you're stuck with the one bite, but the shark is stuck with a terrible aftertaste. And really, we should just sympathize with the shark a little bit. But it's still like bears. People are terrified of bears, and hey, you're on the wrong side of a bear. It's bad. But more frequently, a bear wants your garbage. A bear wants the food you have tied to a tree. And if you camp next to a bag of food tied from a tree, the bear will go for the tree. The bear, we are not very delicious, but we project monstrosity onto animals. Wolves, similarly, especially now, decade on decade, and certainly century on century, wolves have learned, stay the heck away from them. They kill us all the time. Meanwhile, we've learned, be scared of them, kill them all the time, and then we'll be safe, which is a byproduct of monstrosity. And there are downsides. Let's say if you're a rancher, wolves are dangerous to livestock. There is a negative, but monstrosity is not necessarily reasonable, especially as we take more and more land, as we take more and more of the ocean. As it is, like the shark is just like, this is my living room. What are you guys with feet doing here? And so, similarly, in the human experience, I mean, it is Pride Month. Happy Pride, my friend. Pride. But like the history of transphobia, of queerphobia, of homophobia in the United States, of looking at human beings through a monstrous lens. They must be dangerous because of an identity. Same with anti-blackness. Same with, we see far too much of it right now. It's very corrosive and dangerous to identity. But when I see it, because of the life I've led, because of the interest I have in biology, but also in my fellow human beings, I see invitations to sympathy. What is your life actually like? Because if somebody is presented as simply a one or two dimensional monster, you know you don't know them.
Yeah.
You know you've got a narrative of them that may or may not be true, and I'm very curious. And it doesn't always mean that you must be permissive or enabling of their behavior, but there is something too that from our research, like the majority of sociopaths are trauma victims who never processed it. And a gentler society could have helped them and could still, if it was possible, to interface with them. There is a need for sympathy rather than Pelican Bay or reopening Alcatraz. And so I see monsters and I'm always like, well, what is the life there? And literature has done some of this too. I'm hardly the first person. I'm very fond of John Gardner's Grendel, which is a novel that looks at the first monster from the Beowulf folk tale and says, what was his life actually like, beyond just being a starling beast who gets his arm ripped off. And then all the way up to something like Martha Wells' Murderbot, which is super popular now. Adore Murderbot, right? It's just the best. And I haven't seen the show yet, but I very much mean to when I start watching TV again. But I've read every novella because it's just a delight. And it posits one of the most beautiful internal lives of a neurodivergent character. Speaks very deeply to me because I am neurodivergent. Am I a robot? No, unfortunately. But
I was like, give me more cogs, I need more cogs.
yes, if I could only have more armor
Be more
plating.
cogs.
It's an invitation to sympathy, and that, and the more you look at it, the more coding you see that werewolves often have within them a fear of human schizophrenia. That vampires, like all the way back to at least Bram Stoker's Dracula, if not before, have gay coding.
Yeah.
That is supposed to make the audience more afraid. To me, that's like, oh, what's your life then? What's being lied about? What's being misrepresented about you? And that is something literature is so adept for doing because books let us go inside of somebody else's mind and somebody else's experience. Now, what you were talking about also is accountability, which is interesting because sympathy and accountability aren't necessarily adversarial. They often are that, like, I feel badly for you, so I will let you off the hook.
Yeah.
And if you're a 5-year-old who spilled my jug of milk, that's totally fine. If you're Darth Vader and you blew up 2 planets, not so much. I'll have some sympathy for you, but that also brings me into contention of, well, what should happen with your life? If restorative justice is impossible in a story, for instance, and in the Greek tragedies, it always is. The whole notion is we have a tragic event, and it destroys someone. I wanted to write a story where the tragedy is at the end of the first act, and then we look at the fallout over the course of someone's life. What do they do, and what do the people around them do? And what I wanted a future for someone who's told they have none.
Yeah.
Because I've at various points in my disabled life been told I didn't necessarily have one. And very fortunately, all of them were wrong. And thank you all for being here as living proof. So then, if we sympathize with a character, we can wish for them to arc towards some kind of self-awareness, some kind of sympathy for others that is projected outward. And that's the kind of literature that means the absolute most to me. It's not Scrooge felt bad on Christmas, right? I'm interested in the Christmas Carol 3 years later. Like, has he actually reformed labor practices? Is he actually better by the Cratchit family? And it's a beautiful story, of course, but there's pieces missing. And if a story ends in a particular place that feels cathartic, I'm always curious about the trends that exist beyond. And that's where accountability lives. If there isn't a right thing to do, what are your actions? Because stopping is never enough. If you're somebody who's done harm, ceasing to do harm, good, great starting place. Absolutely, do that one. Check that one off of the list. But then there should be more of a list. What are your behaviors going to be to try to do something that improves the lives of the people you've hurt, or at least improves somebody's lives with what you have? Because life is not about ourselves, it's about who we're connected with and where we draw meaning from. In this case, Hera realized, like, maybe I just destroyed, like, my biggest fan. What was I thinking? Zeus is to blame, but also not only Zeus. And to turn around and look at even the definition of family and expand that to care for people around her who she didn't realize, like, if I'd focused on them instead, what would I be? Well, I can start today. I can look at my life and see why they were attracted to me in the first place. Wait, I was a monster. Why did you like me?
Yeah.
And the answer being, you're not. You're more than that. You were always more than that. You've done great things. Your response to this showed that there's more inside of you. You were told you're small, even though you fill a great space. And that hurts you in a way that we want to address. So there's just that prospect for growth that always makes me want to go to the keyboard, basically immediately.
I mean, it's interesting because I think that it's the most, like, being like, oh, this person is treated like a monster, but actually they're perfect. I mean, it's a nice step, like,
Yes.
right? Like, we're like, yes, we do want to move past, like, instant monstrosity, but, like, also, when people are put in bad situations, when people are treated poorly, they will oftentimes then turn around and inflict that treatment on others. I mean, something I thought about, too, with, like, mental health, I feel like there's a lot of discourse that's like, well, it's fine to be mentally ill as long as you don't take it out on other people. And I'm like, what do you think mental illness is? Like, right, like, how does this work in your mind, right? Like, and so I think this question of, like, yeah, like, you're gonna do harm, like, right, like, if you are put in these situations, probably you're going to do harm too. And so then what do we do with, like, what do we do with that? I feel like your books are, like, a really beautiful, particularly this book is a really beautiful answer to that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'd like to maybe redirect some of that to you. So, as I think I've mentioned already, like, In Universes was one of my favorite books of last year. And I would love you to talk some about how sympathy for the unexpected refracts your character, given the premise, which I'll let you explain, but the premise of this book and how that gave you this perspective to reach the human. Not necessarily even the accountable, but particularly what sympathy unlocks in your work. Because there's no book like this. I only realized it when I read it.
Yeah, so In Universes basically it begins with a character who is working in an observational cosmology lab and searching for dark matter and very discontented with their life and is having this sort of, like, intense friendship with a sculptor who they thought they had met who they had crossed paths with when they were younger, but they didn't say hello. And they were like, oh, what if I had said hello? That would have been cool. And then the next chapter goes to that universe. So my background, before being a writer, I studied physics and wrote a thesis on the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, which basically suggests that, like, any time that a quantum event occurs, which is all the time, the universes branch into two. And so that would sort of suggest that, like, any possible outcome, like, coexists. You know, if you're like, do I go left or do I go right? Like, both left and right exist. And of course that's happening on a much more microscopic level. But on a big level, it just means that all possibilities sort of happen. And so I wanted to take that idea and say, okay, well, like, yeah, let's follow this character down that road. Like, what if they hadn't met that character earlier? And I think it sort of, the question of, like, sympathy, I think it, if you think about, like, multiplicity in this way, it requires you to, like, consider all the different possible variations of yourself that could exist and all the things that could go right and all the things that could go wrong and all the harm that you could do. Because if every world exists, like, you probably done a lot of very bad things in some of those worlds. Like, at the very end of the book, a character's, like, talks about how they're like, I think if I wanted to know if I was, like, a good or a bad person, I would have to take the integral of myself over all the different universes, which is, of course, like, sort of meaningless. But I think, yeah, it like, demands that you take seriously both, like, the good that could come and also the harm that you could do. And I think I'm really interested in this in a sort of similar question where it's like, if you are a closeted, queer, neurodiverse person without a lot of familial support, you're probably going to do some real harm in the process of figuring yourself out. And what does it look like to really reckon with that? You know, like, I think about how when I was younger and I was being, like, bullied for being queer before I had any idea what any of it meant. And I was like, ew, gross, a lesbian. I don't know what a lesbian is, but I can tell it's an insult. I want to be that, you know? Right? And you sort of, you echo these, like, really terrible views and you sort of, like, then oftentimes perpetuate, like, or, like, perpetrate them on other people. And I think that, yeah, this sort of simultaneous question of, like, how do you reckon with the harm that is done to you and how do you reckon with the harm that you do to others because of that was something that I was really interested in. And I think over the course of the novel, moves across universes, but I wanted it, like, ends in a way in, like, the worst possible universe, where things have gone very, very wrong. And it felt important to me to end there because I wanted to be like, okay, what happens when like, you know, there's this relationship with this friend that goes very badly. The narrator is very cruel to this friend, and in the last chapter, the friend dies by suicide after this. Very like, you know, very sad, very irrevocable. Like you said, like there's no reparation to be done. And so, what do you do then? What do you do when things have gone wrong beyond correction? Like, how do you learn to live with that? And how do you still find a life that is like worth living? How do you like forgive yourself, but not in a way that does away with what you have done to others? Like, how do you take responsibility and also still love yourself and move forward and have like a life that is worth living?
Yeah.
And I think like my like deep belief that like sort of undergirds the book is that like no matter how bad things are, no matter like how bad the situation seems, like there is a way to turn it into to like find a universe that you are happy to live in, to like craft a universe that you're happy to live in. I think, yeah, through things like found family, which is also really important in the book. Yeah, there's a lot of similarities, really.
Yeah, I love that like at a very root, we were talking earlier that we're very interested in speculative fiction, fantasy, science fiction, whatever nomenclature you want to use to describe it, but it is the lens through which you get in touch with some part of humanity that you haven't found in storytelling yet. And that's what's so compelling, because the greatest gift of art is to take you into somebody else's experience and expand one's empathy. Or at least it's my favorite thing I like about it. And so, yeah, in a lot of multiverse stories, you know, you'll get, here's the mustache version of you, who's a bad person who you should defeat. And those are fun.
Yeah.
But and then there are simple ones where it's just like, if you made two choices, you'd be happy or you'd be unhappy.
Yeah, totally.
A very simple binary. And for an infinity simply does not operate in binaries. And that's so fun to see the intimate branches within the possibilities of a person, and how you don't eschew how important it is for whatever choices you've made, that is who you are and that is meaningful in itself.
Well, there's something I think, and I've been thinking about that's like very heteronormative about many of our multiverses. Like, I think like so often the multiverse story is like, you start in your life, you venture to different branches, you realize that all along the life you were living is the best life, and you go back to where you started. It's like a return to like the norm, as opposed to like an opportunity to get weirder and stranger and different and to move to something new.
Yeah.
So I knew I really wanted to like reject that kind of like, it's like, I think if you start a multiverse story, you're like, oh no, now I have infinite worlds. What do I do with them? Like, how do we end? Where does it stop? And so I think oftentimes the answer that people get, I think when they are faced with that question, is like, well, we better go back to the beginning. Yeah. It was like the original life was the best all along, and so I really wanted to like push back against that, because I do think there's something very like, very heteronormative about that. Like, no, like go towards something weirder and newer and something different. Like you don't have like something that I love about this book, without any spoilers, right, is that like you don't end where you began. You're not like, okay, you've like done this horrible thing, and now we're gonna end up with you back with Megara and like, you know, like in a different version of the same beginning. Like, it's like you end up someplace totally different because you have to.
Right, you're not the same person
You're not the same person anymore.
Right, so you don't have the same needs. Going in the circle, I think the best circle stories show that you return home and you're not the same, and home is no longer the same. Which is, you know, the classic you can't go home again title and turn of phrase.
Fonda Lee has a great, talks about who did the Greenbone series. She talks about how she has this recurring scene where the characters all go to this like specific restaurant, but every time you go back to the restaurant, it makes the reader process all of the things that have changed in the meantime, which I thought was very brilliant.
Yes, I love if a character has changed very much, put them against something that hasn't, and it shows how far the character has gone. And we're constantly changing, and even if we're harmed, it's not necessarily that we've changed for worse. We've changed to have different needs, to have different aptitudes. Sometimes you grow. But was it good that I became disabled? Not necessarily. Was it good that I learned to walk again? Quite a bit. My needs in life changed, and that growth was powerful, and it turned me into the person I am. And whether that is the best of all possible worlds is not my concern, right?
That's like the very last line of my book like ends with like this line about like, I wouldn't want to say that something good came of this, but that's not to say that nothing good came. which like the exact same thought, or like where like some terrible things happened, and if somebody was like, oh, it's good that those things happened because now look how I would like punch them in the face. But it's true that like you end up in a place where you're like, wow, I love my life so much that I can't actually like go back and wish these things undone because I wouldn't be here and I wouldn't have my found family and I wouldn't have these things that I have now.
Yeah. And even in like simple stories of change, it is always lovely when somebody goes out and they're like, oh, I can't get home. And then they make a ton of friends in Oz.
Yeah.
And they can't wait for the sequel to see them again.
Yeah.
It is fun. And there's a reason L. Frank Baum wrote like 11 of them or whatever. And that's fun to explore. In this book, he obviously can't go back to being who he was before. He's never going to be changed, but he's also never asked for it, right?
Yeah.
Heracles is looking for the right thing to do, and in part it is looking for the answer. Which god is responsible for this? Where is the Fury? What can the Fury tell me once I find her? But it is also the life that he is building, that he has helped the Lion, that he has helped the Hydra, that they've become found family for him. If he were to go back to the beginning, and I won't spoil that, but if he were, they would have to come with him, whether they were physically or whether they're just their imprint on him would still be with him. And I think that is wherever you are in your life, all of that still matters. Good or bad is set aside from that. This is what you are, and you can reckon with that. And that's where healing and construction can come from, is reckoning with what you are, not what you should be, not what you used to be. Those things can inform us, but what we are is what matters.
Yeah, absolutely. This is like a sort of logistical question I'm thinking about with these questions of like coming back, and also the you're talking about like him wanting to know who did it, but actually like he is not the one mostly who wants to know. Mostly it's Megara who wants to know. And so this leads me to a very specific question, which is like, I was reading about the actual Heracles myth, because of course, and I noticed that in that myth, Megara dies. So tell me about the decision. There are two differences that I noticed. There was that one, and then also that in the, I'm sure there's lots of, I'm saying the original. This is Wikipedia. I'm sure that there are lots of different originals and lots of contention because this is mythology. Another point that I did flag though was that apparently Alcmenes like left him out to die, and then Hera was tricked by either Zeus or Athena into nursing the baby, and then when he hurt her, she threw him away, and that's how the Milky Way was invented. Or created, I guess, more than invented. But so I'm curious about your choices around those.
Sure. Okay. So first, Megara, Heracles' wife, mother of their 3 children, the linchpin of the household, and the version I grew up reading, she was killed as well, or he kills her as well as the children. And there's a trope in science fiction and fantasy that's called frigid, which is where your significant other dies to deepen your pain and your arc, which I'm not terribly fond of because it's been overdone, especially to be done to women. And then as I was doing research, I noticed that there's like this great epic poem of Megara's lament. I was like, wait, how did that get written? She's supposed to be dead, isn't she? And then there's like, and then there's this version where after he's done with his labors, she gets married to his nephew. I was like, wait, how? And I realized like it actually in the majority of the source texts, which we don't actually have any of, right? Because this is all hearsay, and different regions of Greece and then later Rome had different versions of the stories. But in the majority of them, Megara lived, and I was just fed the one where she died. And then when I was like, wait, she can live? Oh, she's living now. Because I wanted her experience of it as well.
Yeah, she's so great in your book.
Because this is an opportunity for a totally different response to the deaths. She is more vengeful, which understandable. Vengeance makes sense in this sense. And she won't let Heracles take his own life because she's like, we got to find who did this.
It's also just more practical in general. Vengeance is a sort of practical pursuit. Heracles is like over here, like being like, let me pray, let me think about this. Like, and she's like, all right, we've got a list, we've got things to do, come on.
Yeah, right. She's like literally made the list of the 12 gods. Like, we're going to scratch these off. We're going from temple to temple to figure this out. And putting them deeply in love with each other, but deeply hurting, and they don't fit together the way they used to,
which feels really
but
real.
They still deeply care. And it's not as though I don't want you in my life. It's that I don't know how things fit anymore. And so some of the adventure they do together, and then they part because she has a plan and is so certain the gods are watching that if I split from you for now, they might not hear my plan, and they will be watching you, and mine might work.
Yeah.
And that goes to places that I don't want to spoil.
Yeah.
But those are also, that is agency and utility that Megara does not get in any of the old versions of the text. I got to make her more of a character, and that felt very good, but it also got to let a different kind of grieving happen. And show how people go through stages of caring about each other, rather than the two, Heracles and Megara, just care about each other. One thing I did in the book, which is slightly suggested by some source material, but is never confirmed, is we don't know which gods Megara would have worshipped. And so I got to be playful with it and made her, because he's like, oh, you must worship Athena. She's like the smart one. And you're a genius. And she's like, no, I worship Ares. Why do you root for the jerk god of war? And she's like, because I want the right conflicts to come my way. And she is very practical and is then unprepared for some things. But then some of the things she believes about Ares wind up resonating when we meet Ares. And Ares also got to be fun. But my writing of Ares was always a reflection of Hera, of Megara. And so she enabled him. And I'm also proud of what I did with Ares, which is the weird relationship, because Ares is one of Hera's children, and when he realizes like something is going on, you've shaken your confidence. I'm going to follow you everywhere to make sure you get what you need. But he doesn't know what she needs. But he's trying to protect her. And what I got to explore, which becomes the text, is why is war the god of family? Because she's the goddess of family, he's the god of war. What's the relationship there? And playing with that made both of them come open in this beautiful way that only happened because I let Megara live. and it felt so incredibly right. Her experience of that loss belongs in the book.
I mean, it brings it to life, I think, in a way, by like having the sort of like outside perspective. Like something about her grief made the whole thing feel like it hit harder. I think because she's someone who is in a way outside of the conflict and is like collateral, right? Like is like right, like Hera doesn't care about her, right? Hera cares about Heracles and like coming for him, and she is getting the like collateral damage of that. I feel like she made the grief feel a lot more tangible.
Thank you. Yeah, that's. It also works because Heracles cares so much about whatever she thinks. Right? They have collaborated so strongly that this being the first schism for them is this different kind of test. Then you had also asked about Heracles being nursed by Hera. So
how are we getting the Milky Way, John?
Yes, how are we getting the Milky Way? Yes, so this is Heracles has a lot of weird bits to his story, and a lot of the weirder bits in my book are actually from one mythological source or another. But this one I did align, because Hera, being a god, experiences time very differently than we do. So if she gets distracted for a minute, suddenly he's a teenager. It's like, oh, damn it. I was trying to kill that guy, and now he's an adult who can drink. So one of the reasons it got elided from the story is that simply he wasn't going to be a baby for very long. And for those of you who read the second chapter, you will see maybe my favorite part of his childhood. His response to the first assassination attempt was a real joy to write. Because he doesn't think it's an assassination attempt. So that was part of it. Another part of it is that as I was structuring the beginning of his life and the beginning of the book, there were parts of the Heracles thing that just didn't fit, and one of them is, what is the point of the myth of he bites Hera on the boob? Why is this?
That's a great question.
Why is this even in this story? So yeah, the myth is that at one point Heracles' mother is so scared of Hera that she throws Heracles, the baby, out in the woods, and it's just like, she'll kill him, and then she'll leave me alone, and I'll be safe, which is how things work. And then Athena or Zeus, and it's in most of the sources it's Athena, collects Heracles and brings him to Hera and says, like, look at this lost baby who is starving, and Hera, not recognizing Heracles, goes like, oh, you poor thing, and being the goddess of mothers, just instantly nurses him. And then it's like, and then this infant hated her and bit her, and she throws him across the cosmos. and the milk spurts into the sky. And I'm not kidding. This is why it's called the Milky Way. That is the source of the name of the Milky Way, and it's completely absurd.
You're welcome. Now you all know this fun fact.
Yes, and that is literally where we get that term. Is all of those stars and all of those galaxies that are sometimes visible in the sky were supposed to be Hera's mother's milk that nourished the cosmos. And it is wild, and it is kind of funny, and it is kind of weird, but making a baby evil was just not terribly interesting to me as somebody who's fascinated with psychology. It was very funny to agonize over. There were a lot of things that I could have written in Heracles' youth. The Greeks probably had systemic bisexuality that would have been interesting to...
I was reading about that also.
Yeah, and it would have been interesting to observe, okay, and if they tried to do that to an 11-year-old who could bench press the moon, how would it work out for them? Probably not tremendous for them.
I also love how you have him be, one of the fun facts, he's incredibly strong, but he doesn't have to do he never has to work out or anything, so he's sort of portrayed as I think he's pot belly, he just does not look stereotypically like Hercules.
He is not Herculean, yes.
That's amazing. Because
he inherited in Papa Zeus's strength, he is so strong, nothing's hard to do. Therefore, he cannot get swole. Therefore, he's just a chubby guy from Greece.
I love it.
And he can't fix it. No amount of sit-ups are hard.
Yep.
There's nothing he can lift that is hard. So yeah, that was very fun to play with. What would his physique be? And then his brother gets very jealous, and his brother gets jacked.
Yep.
And then all those statues are of his brother.
Yeah.
It's a mistake. That was super fun to do. I mean, any kind of weird humanizing touch to do on mythology is it's like catnip. It's just too fun to be well, what if the cosmos were even more weirdly human?
Yeah.
That is an enormous attractive point to mythological retellings.
What if the Milky Way?
What if the Milky? Yes, you're right. I did leave that on the cover, but don't use crying over spilled Milky Way.
So true. So true.
So.
Do you have other speaking of mythology, do you have other favorite mythology books? Retellings or what have you?
Sure. In terms of myths and folklore, the Native American or Indigenous American stories of Glooskap are very interesting because he's a Native American trickster. Wasn't even necessarily a deity. He was just a person who was so clever. And he's kind of like Anansi the spider, but he's playing against the elements and against the different tribes in very fun and creative ways. I think he's like a way cooler Loki. And with a bit more of a moral compass. But so the Glooskap legends are very fun. Celtic mythology or Celtic folklore is very fun, especially because they often have amoral morals. You got a ring that made you invisible and a knife that can cut through anything, but you got him from the devil. And you're gonna what should you do when he comes for his fee? Well, it's obviously put the invisibility ring on and stab him. Oh, okay. So this isn't learn your lesson. Don't make a deal with the devil. It's when the devil comes, stab him, which is a wonderful.
Use the tools you've got.
Yeah, exactly. Be resourceful, which is very Irish.
Yeah.
And I have a great fondness for those weird Celtic folk tales. Inside of mythology itself, I will not lie. I am a huge dork for Homer. I've read more than 10 translations of the Iliad and the Odyssey. It's just too interesting, especially because different translators approach it in such different ways. I don't know if anybody here has read the recent Emily Wilson translation, right? Because she's a rock star, and it's incredible what she's doing. In fact, I feel like those books are worth the price on the cover just for her forewords, which are sometimes 50 pages long, of just why she made these word choices. Like in her translation of the Odyssey, she deliberately includes the word slave, which was not in about 200 years of translations, even though there's clearly human trafficking all throughout the Iliad and the Odyssey. And it's so interesting to see what translators bring that is uncovered from history or that deliberately diverges. The Alexander Pope Iliad it just straight up changes events. It's not really a translation. But it's so lyrical because Alexander Pope was one of the greatest poets of his century, at least in the English language. And then also because the things he changed kind of unveil what his time saw as humanity. And so it's always fun to revisit a thing like that, whether you put it in our mythology or folklore or whatever. Dante's Divine Comedy is similarly very revisitable. His biases are obvious no matter the translator, right? Because especially the Inferno is just the people I hate are in hell, the series, and that's fun. But it's what different kinds of morals or meaningful subtext does a translator put into all of the descriptions, all of the encounters? That's what makes that so revisitable from different points of view. So those are some of my favorite. I also have a soft spot for Luo Guanzhong's Romance of the Three Kingdoms, which is kind of the Iliad of China. Except it's like if the Iliad and the Odyssey and all of the Homeric books we lost, all of them were just retained. Romance of the Three Kingdoms is like 82 years of war history as a giant folk myth, and it's overwhelming, and it's it's only 1,600 pages, and it's only 1,600 pages because there's just so much history he's chronicling that also totally didn't happen. He's biased as hell, and it's so fun to see where he's like, oh well, you clearly hated people from there. Yeah, so those are definitely some of mine, and then retellings. We all have a soft spot for Madeline Miller's Circe. Madeline Miller's Circe is a modern classic because Circe exists mostly as just fragments across the history of mythology. And to connect them all and then fill in the gaps, as she does, to create a biography of this person and give her this internal life rather than just making her a scary witch on an island in the Odyssey. It's so human. You cry for her. She doesn't even need to do much other than talk to Icarus's dad. And you're just like, oh, loneliness is so potent, even across centuries. I too wish Circe could go to the cookout. That's certainly a retelling that I adore. Yeah. And then I mentioned Grendel by John Gardner. Yeah. What about you? Do you have retellings that you dig? Besides this one, obviously.
That's a really good question. I'm sure I do, but I'm not off the top of my head. I'm gonna have
sure. No. While you think, I just realized there's one more retelling. Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight, because they are the modern retellings. We just won't stop redoing Spider-Man and Batman and whatever. But Nolan has such an interesting vibe with the darker elements that became like definitive of that character. And it helps that he has unbelievable actors and Hans Zimmer doing an unbelievable score. But that is just a retelling. And it's very funny to think that the next iteration on a popular IP is retelling the character. Also, similarly, the new Barbie movie, which is funny as heck and has a lot of meaning, right? Like, they didn't construct that movie to say nothing. It's super interesting to see these as retelling, because we don't retell Robin Hood and King Arthur as often anymore.
That's so interesting. Yeah, that's really true. That's fascinating.
Yeah, and it's funny because they've just been overtaken. Like now, not everybody wants to see Iron Man. Oh, give me an X-Men retelling. Yeah. I'm always here for next, because the X-Men, that's my heart right there. I had those guys on my wall in high school. Absolutely, yes, I'll take an X-Men retelling. And really, just any serial comic that goes long enough inevitably retells itself as new writers, as new artists come in. And it's very interesting, something like, Stan Lee has passed away, Jack Kirby has passed away, the creators of these characters are gone. In fact, sometimes the next generation of writers have passed away, and those characters are still being reinterpreted for new meaning. And it's very interesting to see whose interpretations last in public memory, what resonates about them. Because I have a soft spot for the Professor X archetype, because he's like, he's rich, he can psychically change anybody's mind, and his idea is, I don't want to be the main character. I want to make a school where I teach kids how to become their own main character. Yeah. And it's such a great premise. Yeah. I'm always a sucker for him coming in, even if his politics are wrong.
Also, not exactly a retelling, but Hades, the video game.
Yes.
I love so much. I love those characters. Like the character work in that video game is so good.
Yes.
Thanatos, amazing.
Yeah, Thanatos is one of the best characters.
And also Sisyphus. Sisyphus is amazing. Sisyphus reminded me, it sort of made me think of your book. I was sort of waiting for Sisyphus to show up, because I feel like he has a sort of Wiswellian vibe. The Sisyphus in Hades is very, very cheerful. Nothing can get him down. He's friends with the boulder.
Yes, his friendship with his own boulder is my favorite. If you don't know the myth, does everybody know the myth of Sisyphus? Yeah, the idea that he's like, this is my companion in struggle.
Boldy.
Is so fun. Yes, Boldy.
Yeah.
It's so good. Supergiant Games is an incredible creative studio, and their remixing of Greek mythology works so well.
So good. I should also open it up. Does anyone have any questions? We can definitely keep chatting, but since we're getting close to the hour.
What do you think somebody who practices Hellenism today would think about your book?
Hopefully,
I know somebody, so that's what I'm asking.
Awesome. Yeah. So, to some degree, it depends on the. It's funny to say denomination of Hellenism, right? What is the flavor? But at the same time, the way to process it is how divergent from the material you find sacred are you willing to see from different angles. Now, in my experience spiritually, it's nourishing to see different angles, even ones that I disagree with. And I'll say that, like, it's funny because I have a lot of Greek friends, although not a lot who practice Hellenism. A lot of them are just straight up agnostic. And yet, they are very interested to see different angles on known things for both retention of meaning, because the more iterations on meaning in a story we get, it can increase our own edification from them. There's also that playfulness is essential to maintaining something as something that's alive rather than merely sacred. And it's funny to think of something as merely sacred because we enshrine the sacred. And yet, playfulness is the thing being alive rather than only being retained and calcified. So I'd hope that both the playful sides of this would be received in good faith, but then that the heavy parts, because there are some heavy parts in this book about a father who's dealing with trauma and a goddess who's losing faith in herself. But these themes would, I mean, I hope they are viewed as harmonizing with ancient tradition because that's where they're rooted, but I hope that they would help deepen one's appreciation for one's own spirituality. That's obviously a big thing for me to ask for somebody, but I hope that they would be processed like that.
It's not necessarily book related, but did you watch Chaos and what did you think of it? Because I loved it. So
I'm only part way through Chaos. I think Jeff Goldblum is immaculate casting for Zeus. Yeah, it's real good. I'm trying to remember the actor who's cast as Prometheus, who is like really fantastic as sort of the narrative
he's so
device.
good in it. Yeah.
The acting is just top notch.
Mm-hmm.
I am a slow watcher of things is my problem. I basically watch when I'm working out or if it's a social thing. Like my friends wanted to go see Barbenheimer, so I went and saw Barbenheimer at midnight, right? But then like, if my friends aren't doing a movie thing, I'm much more of a reader or a gamer. But I thought it was pretty darn funny. And I mean, the Goldblum sets himself up so well for the come down that Prometheus is scheming for him. So I enjoyed what I saw of it, but I haven't finished it yet.
Okay.
Did you see Chaos?
I have not, but I'm sold on the Jeff Goldblum as.
Oh, yeah, and Dionysus steals the show. Just he steals it. Sorry.
No,
as he should. As he really should.
Yes.
Yeah, he's such an interesting and underserved deity in terms of the remixes and the retellings. Even in Jennifer Saint's Ariadne, which does do a whole section on her falling in love, or at least allying with him. He goes from like a very interesting guy to a jerk madman at the drop of a hat. I was like, oh man, because Saint is so capable of deep emotionality, and Ariadne has a lot of that, especially for the sisters. But I was like, I was really hoping you were going to dig deeper into why Dionysus changes so much, which the show gives him like a very full, robust arc, or at least this much of a robust arc based on what John watched of it. And I just assume you can tell where it's going from there.
We have time for one more question if anybody wants to be brave. No, brave.
When are you reading next?
All right, we both have answers to this, right? So I just finished the rough draft of my third book.
I'm so excited excited about this one.
It is about a ridiculously grumpy dragon who pretends to be tame so he can eat for free at the local dragon riding college. And he gets a very eccentric rider who thinks she has a deep spiritual bond with him. It's like, yeah, we do. Okay, whatever keeps the food coming, I guess. And it is a real joy to write them. They are my newest dynamic duo. The book is supposed to come out next year. Is called The Dragon Has Some Complaints.
So good. Do you know what the rough ETA is?
I think it's by summer.
Nice.
Yes, I guess it depends how fast my editor works and how well I did it. If it takes forever, I did a terrible job.
I doubt that very much.
What about? Are you able to talk about what you're doing next? It's okay if you can't.
No.
I can make it up. Something really good.
It will take me a long time. I'm slow.
Can we get a huge round of applause for our authors?